Now, if you know my channel, you know that I do like to try to branch out a little bit with my reviews, not just reviewing scale 500, but also scale 400 or 200. And earlier this year, I actually did get some scale 400 models that I, for various reasons, just didn't get around to review. I will be reviewing them later this year for sure, but thanks to Jumbolino, I'm actually able to show you far more scale 400 and 200 models than I originally thought. So a big thanks to Jumbolino Model for making this review possible. I can highly recommend them to you. You can check them out via the link you can find in the video description below. With that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at a Boeing 737-300 of Lufthansa. And we do have the Lufthansa branding here in the front of the box, alongside also the rendition of the aircraft. This design is kind of repeated on the backside of the box, so again here we have the Lufthansa branding and Lufthansa logo, but we do also have the schematic again, but here also a top-down view on these lovely renditions. So overall really nice design, and of course also very importantly we have the specifications, so you do get a little bit more information regarding the aircraft type. And here she is, the Boeing 737-300 in one of the classic liveries of Lufthansa. Now, if you are like me, you will probably mostly think of the 737-300 in the 1990s colors of Lufthansa, but a handful of aircraft were already delivered to Lufthansa in 1986, and by then they were of course still using this classic livery of Lufthansa that they had used through the 70s and 80s. Now, this aircraft then later, by 2001, was sold on to the Chilean Air Force and had by then also been converted into a freighter. But here we are looking at how the aircraft looked originally when it first was delivered to Lufthansa. And how has JC Wings done with this aircraft model? That is what we want to find out. And we will find out by simply taking a look step by step at it, starting off with the tail section. When we're on the vertical stabilizer, I have the classic Lufthansa branding or logo. On top of that, we have the last two letters of the registration code and the flag of the Federal Republic of Germany. Underneath the tail, we have a little bit more printed detailing, including the APU exhaust. And on the side of the fuselage here, we find the aircraft type specification, a bit of detailing in the cabin door, and the full registration code. Also notice the markings around the horizontal stabilizer. These are the markings indicating the angle of attack. Now, if we follow the dark blue cheat line to the front of the aircraft, we can see here again the writing of Lufthansa. Underneath all that, we then also find the name of the aircraft. In this case, the aircraft is named after the city of Delmenhorst. We have the city crest as well, and kind of again the aircraft type specification. Then we of course also find a few markings and the Lufthansa logo just underneath the cockpit windows. So let's move on to the cockpit section itself, where we of course have the cockpit windows with the metallic edges above that. Back then, of course, the 737 also still had these eyebrow windows. Well, they technically still have them today, but they are deactivated in most aircraft nowadays. But here they were still active. Then of course we also have the window wipers and the lovely blacked out nose, but I will get back to the nose and the cockpit section later in this video. Then we can also move on to the engine nacelles. Now here we have like a light grayish color on those, and apart from that we of course then have the silver leading edge and some safety markings printed on, as well as a few small other markings and hatches. And just look underneath the engine how lovely detailed that is, with loads of print. That is always a nice sight. Also the physical detailing not too bad at all, for example here with the engine fan blades. Oh my god, look at all these lovely models. Oh, I'm sorry that I interrupted your review, but we'll get back to that model in just a second. But just check out all these lovely models. And perhaps you're like me and you just don't know which one you should add next to your collection, because here you're truly spoiled for choice with all the scales and all the die-cast manufacturers that you can find at the Jumbolino model store. So do check them out. You can find a link to them in the video description below. Now coming back to the aircraft model here in front of us, we can see here just above the wings we have the emergency exit printed on, leading us straight on to the wings, which we of course should also take a closer look at, starting off with the top side, where we have the different flap slats and spoilers carved out quite nicely. We have some different shades of grey for additional detailing, and the marking for the emergency exit printed on as well. The underside of the wing has more nice physical detailing, and my highlight here is the fact that we have the landing lights printed on. Now, the landing gear, that is made entirely out of metal, except, of course, for the wheels. They are made out of plastic. Could maybe be a little bit more pronounced overall with the detailing, but it's not too bad, honestly speaking. And what I really like, of course, is with the front landing gear that we do have printed details. Where we also have plenty of printed details is just on the belly of the aircraft. Yes, we do also have a hole for a stand that is not included with this aircraft model, but I think we are kind of compensated with the amount of printed details, even though they do get a little bit impaired by this hole. Now, where we can see that this is definitely an older mold that JC Wings has been using is the way that the wings have been slotted into the aircraft from underneath, like as one solid piece. That leaves these not so pretty gaps, so that's definitely somewhere where they could have improved the mold overall. But we have some physical antennas underneath, which we also find here on top of the fuselage, as well as a beacon light printed on. And then last but certainly not least, we do also have the doors to the cargo compartments printed on here at the back of the aircraft and also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Boeing 737-300 in the classic 1980s standard livery of Lufthansa from JC Wings in scale 1 to 400. And what can we say about this aircraft model? Now, in terms of print quality, I think JC Wings has done a really lovely work with this aircraft model. There are no smudges, edges are clean, there are certainly no print lines to be discovered anywhere, so that is really high quality work here. I also quite like how they have managed to get the polished look of the belly of the fuselage. Yeah, that looks quite nice. Of course, if you handle the aircraft, fingerprints will appear, so maybe use gloves if that is your thing, otherwise just wipe it off afterwards. But yeah, that's of course not the fault of JC Wings. It's just, you know, that's how it is when you have polished metal. But it looks nice on the aircraft model overall, so yeah, print quality top notch in my view. So how about the physical detailing? Yeah, it is clearly an older mold that JC Wings is using here, and honestly speaking, since they clearly have modified it by adding, for example, antennas, maybe they should have not just modified the mold, but actually started from scratch, because where it clearly shows its age is, of course, with the way the wing has been added into the fuselage, having them as one solid piece and then slotting them in from underneath. It leaves these really ugly gaps. That's not so nice. More modern molds, you add the wings from the side so you avoid these kind of gaps. Where it also maybe shows a little bit is with the landing gear. It's mainly the main landing gear, I think, could just be a bit more refined overall. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but yeah, a little bit more refinement here. If it had been a newer mold, I think that would have been easily achieved. Where it, however, does not really work for me is with the nose of this aircraft model. The cockpit section itself for me is fine, but the nose for me looks odd, maybe too pointy, a bit too squared. Yeah, that for me does not really reflect the 737 nose shape, and I think that is definitely the weak point of this aircraft model. But if you can live with the nose and the drawbacks of having clearly an older mold used for this 737-300, then I think it's a nice addition to anyone's classic collection. Having the 737-300 in the 1980s colors of Lufthansa, certainly a short-lived chapter. I believe the 1990s colors as we know it were actually introduced 1989, so this aircraft being delivered 1986. Yeah, quite a short chapter with this livery, and still a nice little addition to anyone's classic collection, I would say. Now with that, we have reached the end of today's episode. If you have enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like. If you are new around here, why not hit subscribe? And with that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.